On this episode of Purposely Curious, we continue with the topic of our dreams. We talk to Danielle Mandarino, a hypnotherapist who also teaches about Dreamwork, and she discusses some of her experiences with Dreamwork. We discuss what some dreams can mean to some of us and how we can try to interpret them. Dreams are personalized to our own lives, so after this conversation, I will definitely be writing them down, and I suggest you do too. So get that notebook ready and get nice and cozy as this episode starts now. Hello, everyone. On this episode, I have Danielle Mandarino, who's a hypnotherapist that also teaches Dreamwork. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So in our last episode that Leonie and I talked about our dreams. And so I mentioned some of the dreams that I've had. And then, Leonie kind of mentioned that he doesn't dream very often. But when he does, he dreams of people who have passed, who are no longer on this earth. And we kind of figured that me and Leonie think of dreams in different aspects or different ways. And so Danielle reached out and said she thought it was awesome that we were talking about dreams because dreams can be very complex for some of us, more than others, right? Some of us dream more than others. Some people say they never dream. And then one of the feedbacks I got from the episode after was that someone named Alondra, who's also a friend, said she also herself had reoccurring dreams. And it was also similar to mine, which was the waves coming. So we were both very interested in the fact that our dreams were very similar and then they kind of stopped. And two, what could it mean? And so that was one of the things that when you and I talked initially, you kind of mentioned certain things that maybe why we dream certain things. So, I'm so glad that you reached out. I do believe this episode's going to be very interesting. And so I'm really, really excited. So I want to start with you introducing yourself and letting everyone know what it is you do and how you got into this field.
Okay. Well, hello. Yes, I've always been interested in hypnotherapy for years and years and years. And but I actually went to school for criminal justice, and I minored in counseling and addictions treatment. And I ended up working for family services for a while, and still really was into like hypnosis, hypnotherapy. And I decided after I stayed home with my children for a little while, I'm gonna go into this. I'm gonna do this. So I went to a school in Arizona and became a board certified hypnotherapist. And I've always been interested in dreams as well. And because I'm interested in the subconscious mind, and our dreams are basically messages from our subconscious mind. Now, people have different takes also on this as well. There's like a real scientific, take on it where it's okay, we get these messages from in our minds and subconscious mind, but then there's also a spiritual aspect too, where many different cultures, especially indigenous cultures, believe that we get messages from our soul as well. And there's several different types of dreams. So I've always been interested and fascinated in dreams. And a couple years ago, I had a few big dreams of my own and came across a shop here. I live in Las Vegas, and there in this shop there was who now I call her my dream teacher, my dream mentor. She was running dream circles, and I was able to participate in them for the last couple years. And she's not really doing them right at this moment, and I decided to step in and do some dream circles and started to get really into dreams and teaching them and everything about them. So I kind of just fell into dream work, and it kind of goes in the subsection of like hypnotherapy, dealing with your subconscious mind. But it's very healing and fascinating to me. So here I am on this path. Yeah.
And what exactly are dream circles?
So this dream circle and how it's run, and she's been from who taught me, she's been running dream circles and doing this for years and years and years. And it she worked with Robert Moss, who it's kind of a mixture of techniques between like ancient techniques and modern dream work mixed together. And it is a dream circle where you could share a dream, either from the past, a childhood, anything that, any type of dream, a fraction of a dream, a big dream. And basically it's an empowerment circle. So, like you said, dreams are complex, and a lot of people are like, well, what does this mean, and how do I do this? So basically we work the dreams, but from a perspective not so much telling you this is what it is and that's what it is. It's really empowering you to interpret it yourself. So what we say is, oh, if that were my dream, this is kind of how I would interpret it. Since everybody is unique and everybody has, their own symbols of what something means. Like a tiger in a dream can mean something completely different to me than it can for somebody else, just based on where, from our lives. Our lives are, we have all different, perspectives. And so that's one of the reasons why, you don't necessarily need a dream dictionary because you can, from what something means to somebody else can be completely different. So basically, it's an empowerment circle where we help each other work our dreams. And I also do a drumming, and it's like a drumming meditation. It is considered to be like a shamanic drumming meditation where you can do dream reentry, where you can kind of work your dreams in a different way, changing an outcome of a dream is particularly like a
Mm-hmm.
nightmare or something of that nature. And it's very healing. It's basically a healing circle.
Mm-hmm.
So
So,
yeah.
what would you say about my dream, which I had mentioned in our dreams episode, the last episode that we published, where when I was in my early teens, I kept
Mm-hmm.
dreaming that I could see a huge like tsunami type wave
Mm,
coming, and then I
yeah.
would start drowning, and then
Mm-hmm.
when my vision would go in my dream, everything would go
Mm-hmm.
black. That's when I would wake up. And I had
Mm,
that reoccurring dream, and it was always the same thing until the last time I had the dream. Again, everything came about the waves. I'm underwater, I'm drowning, everything is dark. And then I wake up in my dream on rocks in the
mm.
ocean, like literally, like I woke up on rocks. And that was the last time I had that dream. And so looking back, I'm like, was I going through something? Like I can't understand it as an adult, but I will never forget that I had those reoccurring dreams for as long as I did.
Right. Absolutely. Especially like I think with recurring dreams, our dreams are trying to talk to us and tell us something like, and get our attention. And I would say that would be a really big dream. And there's some similar type themes can run for people, and some similar things for me, like water, particularly in a dream or something of that nature, does represent our emotions. And funny you say that. I actually had a dream of this big tsunami type wave, and somewhat recently. This is right before. So I am last year. I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I had to go through, oh my gosh, a lot. Like I was on my deathbed when I
Mm,
first started this chemotherapy, and it was awful. And I refused a certain treatment because my body just could not handle it. And when I came out of that one and was ready to go into my next phase of a different type of chemotherapy, I had this dream that I looked, and there was this big tidal wave, and it was named, in my dream it was named like number 5 tidal wave. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And my aunt was actually with me in this dream, and we looked up, and we ended up, like, I said, okay, just like hold your breath, hold my hand. And it just fell onto me, and I was like tumbling around. And yeah, I knew that I was going to get out of it okay, but it was enormous, and it was a lot, and it was overwhelming. And it's literally right after that, I went through this other set of chemotherapy where I was on this steroid medication, and I really had like huge emotions. I mean, it was a lot to go through. And it's almost like this dream to me was basically telling me and preparing me for, okay, you're going to go through this big, like, waves of emotion, like this is something major is happening here. And number 5 to me is the 5 of change too. So lots of changes, lots of things. And as you get to writing down your dreams or remembering your dreams, you kind of get this sense like, okay, this is kind of a warning, or this is what's going on, or this was coming. So that was that was just recently. That was a pretty big thing that happened in my life. So if I would say, yeah, if you were, as a child, it's taking a look at what is going on. What are there some big emotions? Are there some, asking yourself these questions, or, and as a child it's hard, but if you had told an adult or something of that nature too, to kind of what is going on around that, to work through. Obviously there's something that's reoccurring that's possibly not getting resolved as it's reoccurring, because
Right.
our dreams are trying to tell us something. So it's something to kind of, how can we work through that? Like, let's looking and seeing what's going on in our lives. Like for me, there was a major thing going on, could have been something, or just some, emotionally, or you just have to ask yourself those questions and what's going on, because like I said, our dreams are trying to tell us something. I know I have another example of a recurring dream that my daughter had, because we're talking about childhood. I don't know how old you were, but at that time, but she's a couple years ago, she's 9 now, so she'd be 7. And when I really started getting into dreams, she was having this big dream, a recurring dream of fire.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of almost turned like into a nightmare,
Mm-hmm.
per se, because it was a nightmare is at least something like, it's disturbing. It wakes you up, like out
Mm-hmm.
of, it's not just like, oh, that was kind of a bad dream, whatever. No, no, no. It's like startles you. You know what I mean? It wakes
Yeah.
you up. It's like, this is concerning.
Right.
This is, and she was coming in our room. And so I'm glad that I really got into dreams when I did, because I didn't feel like helpless as a parent, when your children or child or somebody is like going through these dreams. I was at least able to help her with it. And at that time, I think she was just, 7, and just we just, we talked through them, and she kind of, I don't know, she was thinking about like what it would be like if, if my parents weren't here. She was just kind of like going through this time, like just curiosity of her development, just as a child, like, and she was kind of concerned, like, well, what would that look like if you guys weren't here? And it was kind of disturbing her in a way, and coming up in her dream of like our house burning on fire, and but we escaped, and it was all these things, but we were able to really talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And through talking about it, we kind of did a couple different things. And that's number one, it brings it, when you talk about it, at least it brings it to your conscious mind. So it's like not like in your subconscious anymore. It's like, okay, it
Mm-hmm.
kind of releases something, and really, talking about it. And so and she was able to, we talked about like changing up the story, or having a different outcome, or that she had like a superpower. There's all these different techniques to use. And now she has like this great relationship with fire. Number one, it stopped after we talked about it, after we did a couple different techniques and things, it stopped. So that's the goal, is to, really help. And yeah. And so now she has a different perspective on it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's funny because like I said, I think I was in my early teens, and the only thing I can think of is, my dad's a recovering alcoholic. He's been sober for a long time now, but at the time, when I think the only thing I can think of was that he was drinking a lot at that time, and that's the
Mm,
only thing I can think of that potentially
mm-hmm,
maybe made me have those reoccurring dreams. But it's really hard because I wasn't thinking about analyzing my dreams then, and I never
mm-hmm.
mentioned it to any adult, obviously.
Yeah.
But I wonder if that's what it was. But I'll never know. But that's the only thing I can think of as far as like trauma that I was probably
Mm-hmm,
going through. Because
mm-hmm,
I think I was like 13, 14 when he finally decided to
mm-hmm,
stop drinking.
mm-hmm,
But you mentioned I guess I'll never know. But anyways, you mentioned redirecting people. I occasionally have nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
Not very often, but I always being chased by gangsters. Like like they're trying
Okay.
to kill me with guns. And again,
Uh-huh.
I might have it once or twice a
Mm-hmm.
year. But, you know,
Okay.
how did you redirect your daughter? I guess, like, what are the techniques that you used so that maybe some of us can learn to either, you know, teach our children how to redirect themselves or for ourselves, right? When we have those
Yeah.
nightmares.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, there is an it's like part of like a cognitive behavioral therapy. It's called like dream rehearsal therapy, where you kind of imagine a different, basically a different outcome. And so it's in a similar sense, like when I do the dream circles and that it's like, let's say we're in a dream circle and you came and you had that dream and you're like, okay, what, what is going on? Well, you can almost, in a sense, go into, it's called like this dream reentry, where in a like a meditative state, the drum kind of helps you shift your attention. So it brings you from like your left side of brain to your right side of your brain to help you kind of relax and go back into like a dream state to where, but if you're going in with this specific intention or purpose, and then you kind of see what happens. So let's say you go in with the intention to purpose to see, number one, what can you, like, what is going on here? Either you have a question or you go in to face it, but in a safer, secure way. So you can go back in and basically try to kind of rewrite it in a sense. You know what I'm saying? Does it
Mm-hmm.
make sense? Kind of like, yeah. So whether you have this, well, with kids, like, okay, I have this superpower where I'm going to stop them. And I've stopped them into where you could feel safe. So you're kind of like rewriting that experience. And it's just very powerful and empowering in your mind that it's saying, okay, I can turn this around. I can rewrite this so that you don't have to be fearful about it.
Mm-hmm.
And in a sense too, I mean, because a lot of times, yeah, people with either with trauma or something, or you can say, I'm going to look at it from maybe the outside. Maybe you don't want to necessarily jump back in, right? If it's something that's very terrifying to you, you don't want to like jump back in and kind of relive this. It just depends on where you're at and where you feel comfortable with. But you can also, a technique is looking at it kind of from the outside in, like you're just viewing it and changing it.
Mm.
And it does, yeah, and it really does something. It really does help. I mean, I just had a great testimonial of somebody that had a reoccurring dream, and she came to the dream circle, and it was, something that was disturbing her, and she went back in and she kind of rewrote some things, faced a couple things, and her, she told me the next day it stopped. It just stopped. So I mean, everybody, like I said, could be different. Maybe that's what happened with her in one dream circle. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And why, how is that? Like, for example, when I've had like these nightmares, again,
Mhm.
not very often, but there's been maybe one or twice where I woke up, went to the bathroom, went back to sleep, obviously kind of scared, right? And then for some reason,
Mhm.
when I went to sleep, my dream picked up right where it left off. So then whenever I've had these dreams, I sometimes try not to go back to sleep because I want enough time to lapse in between so that it doesn't pick up. Well, like, how is it that the brain knows to pick up where it left off? Like,
I know. It's just amazing. It's amazing because I mean our brains, like when you're going to when you go to sleep, I mean there's so many different things that happen. Like you can just be working out stuff from the day. I mean there's dreams where you're just kind of like working out, Monday things, or it's trying to like taking what your experiences in your life, and also coming up with like future possibilities or future things. That's why, a lot of times you say like, oh, can we dream the future? Yeah, there are like our brains are literally coming up with different things of future possibilities, but then there's like these, is this really a coincidence that happens or not? So I think there's our brains are doing so much and
yeah.
there's like so much going on that, and I think there is this mystery part about it too. maybe not all scientists will say that. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some things that are just like this beautiful mystery about it where it's like, how does this work? Or how does that happen? Or, something where it doesn't seem like it can be really a coincidence. And and if your brain is just really working on that particular situation. But I think using these techniques so people aren't fearful of like going back, and let's say maybe if that were me and I have something, that wakes me up and it's like this, like, nightmarish to me. So before maybe going back to sleep, I might want to relax a little bit
Mm,
and
okay.
try to before going back and try that try that technique of, okay, well, what is it? Number one, two, you can always ask yourself too, like, well, what is it going on in my life? Is there something like I'm literally, maybe if you're running, like, am I running from? Am I this? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it could be, what is this a metaphor for? What is this? You could ask yourself these different questions, as well, and kind of relax into it and flip it a certain way. Like, okay, like whether facing it, whether you're doing something different, try to change it up even before you go back to sleep. Like, have that intention
Mm-hmm.
before you go back to sleep as well, so that you're not as, fearful on going back to sleep.
Now, I have a question on like on Leone's behalf. Like Leone had
Mm-hmm.
mentioned the only dreams he ever has are of people who are no longer with us. Why do you
Mm,
think that would be the case for him?
well, see, I I mean, I believe that, and like I said, not maybe everybody else does, but I believe that there is this spiritual side where our soul is speaking with us to through our dreams as well. And that's that mystery part. And you have, like when my grandfather had passed, and I had a brother who passed, right after that, right after their passing, I have vivid dreams of them. And so you can look at it a couple different ways. Like, there's a certain message that is trying to, that they're trying to say or talk to him about. So there's a couple different ways, and it depends on where your beliefs are, and where
Mm-hmm.
you're at with that as well. Because, like, everybody's, and I'm not, because it's not trying to say this is the way it is or not, but in my experience, that's what it feels like to me, because I've just had so many other experiences that are kind of unexplainable,
Mm-hmm.
that to me, I'm like, okay, there is this soul part, there is this mystery part that is coming through. So it depends on, but he can look at it. It depends on what's going on. Like, what are they saying? What's going on in his life? Is it a person? Maybe that person's coming up because that person has a certain characteristic. So then you could take it down to the person and say, well, what is the characteristics of this person? Like, how they were. Are they trying to tell me something through that?
Mm-hmm.
Depending on what they're saying or doing.
Mm-hmm.
Is this person somebody that's coming back in my life that I had this or that, that I had this great relationship with? I mean, or not. Like I said, it would have to get like more information to dive in. Like, what is this really meaning to me? Why is this showing up in my life right now?
Right.
It really just depends.
And
So
so what
yeah.
do you have to say for example, you know how people sometimes say like and I think I mentioned it also is like you dream of someone you haven't talked to in 10 years and then they call you up the next day.
Yeah. I think that we're all connected into this like bigger consciousness. And for that, and that's where this part is, it doesn't seem like so much of a coincidence. Like, I understand that our brains are gathering so much information. I mean, because it's from our subconscious, unconscious, like, you're gathering so much information that sometimes, oh, I maybe I didn't realize that this is what I was seeing, or this is what I was doing. Maybe, like, but to go for years and years and years makes me makes me seem to me that there's just bigger, that we're connected in a bigger way than, than just, I don't know, because the flip side argument could be like, well, you saw maybe like an item or watch that was from, or you know what I mean, that was from them. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you dreamt it. Like, like people can break it down to where, well, you're from your subconscious mind, there was something that you didn't realize that maybe related to them, or but you didn't realize it into your dreams, or something like that. But I mean, and I had a similar experience of a dream, and like you said, that haven't, that years that you can't, that all of a sudden you run into the person. And this this particular one, I had a friend in my childhood, and we lost touch for several years, probably like, I don't know, 15, 20 years. And I had a dream of her and her mother. And in the dream, it was kind of like, it looked like death came over them, but they
Mm.
weren't dead.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, I hadn't thought about them. I haven't, talked about that. I mean, it's been like 15 to 20 years lapse, since I had anything. And and so I thought, okay, this is really strange. Like, this is really strange. And then I thought about it again in my waking life, like just walking around in my waking life. I'm thinking, okay, this image keeps coming up. I had this in a dream. This image keeps coming up. Something, for me, from the dream was telling me is that somebody close to them had passed. They did not pass. They had not passed, but somebody close to them had passed. And I thought, I better really look into this.
Mm-hmm.
And um, so I decided, okay, I'm gonna really look into this. And I try to find him on social media, and I try to find, and I didn't find, I didn't find my friend. But then I kept looking, and I found out that it was her a sister who passed. And I thought, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
wow, like how does that like how does that happen?
Mm-hmm.
How does that happen? And then I thought, well, why now? And it happened to be the same age, when she had passed, she was the same age as when my brother had passed.
Oh, wow.
They were both 32 years old when they passed. And they were both our siblings and younger siblings. And so I thought, this is just wild, right? Like, this is
Mm-hmm.
just wild. This is just crazy. And so I decided to just, I lit a candle, I said a prayer, and I just said, you know what, if I'm meant to run into her at some point, I mean, I'm talking, this has been so many years that I'm meant to somehow, like I said, she's not on social media, she's not on whatever. So I lit a candle, and I said a prayer. And a couple months later, my my wife and my daughter were driving, and I was at home. And I happened to be at home, I don't know, looking at the computer, this and that, and I thought, oh, you know what? We should go to this martial arts place. I don't know. We hadn't talked about it really. I said, oh, the kids should try it. The kids should just go and try it. And I called my wife, and I said, hey, we should go to this martial arts place that's down the street, and try it out, randomly. This was random. And she goes, you know what's crazy? She goes, your daughter, she's like, she just drove by this martial arts place and said, we should go in there tonight. Now, this is not related. Like, we didn't talk about this or discuss this before. And so I thought, okay, this is wild. We need to go in there tonight. And it was in the middle of the week. And we walk in there, and I see her brother.
Mm.
And we end up getting reconnected. And we've
Yeah.
been talking ever since.
Wow. Isn't that
So,
amazing?
yeah. So, having these experiences and saying, like, oh, it's just a coincidence, or like trying to really nitpick it and break it down with science, it's just too much for me. I think that there's so much out there that we don't know. And I don't know everything about dreams and the universe and consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
I probably never will, and it's okay. But those are the types that I'm like, there's just something magical with
Yeah.
dreams and our
Yeah.
connection, between us and humans, and and everywhere in this world, in this life. Yeah.
Yes. And you know that I'm a hospice nurse. Um,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have, it just triggered a memory of a dream I had.
Okay.
So when you admit people to hospice, it's usually because sometimes doctors feel that there's not much they can do. And so it's about palliating symptoms, making sure everyone is
Yeah.
comfortable.
Yes.
But sometimes people do come off service because they're doing really well and they're no
Mhm.
longer deemed terminal. So I had
Mhm.
this patient maybe 12, 13 years ago who was on for, I want to say maybe COPD, which is an obstructive breathing disease that people have
Mm.
trouble breathing. But the point is, we took her off service because she was doing well and she no longer met the criteria. It's almost like she had an exacerbation of her symptoms and then she was fine.
Mhm. Mhm.
So we took her off. So we call it, some of us do, not, I'm sure not every hospice person, but they graduated hospice, for better things, right?
Mhm.
Maybe if, I don't know how long ago, or not how long ago, but how long after I had this dream, but this patient came into my dream
Mhm.
and it had been years and she was in my dream and I remember waking up and thinking it was odd that I was dreaming of her. And then
Mhm.
but it was a peaceful dream. And I just
Mm.
was like, I wonder if she finally passed. There was no way I could find out because this was from an old job at that point. I had moved on. But
Okay.
I always thought that maybe she came to say goodbye to me, even though I never, she might not be with us anymore. But at the time, I thought maybe she passed and that was her way of reaching out. I have no way of knowing that, but that's just how I interpreted that
Oh.
dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. It's just wild, you know?
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
mean, there's so much weird stuff we see in my line of work that I believe that that's
Mhm.
probably what it was, but I'll never
Okay.
know. I mean, there's no science really, or there might be science to back certain things up, but everyone's so like
Yeah.
skeptical about all of it.
Yeah.
But
Right.
yeah, that's one of those. I think she
Right.
came to visit me.
Oh. Oh, that's nice. That's sweet. Yeah. Yeah. It is. It's just um I just find it very fascinating and healing too. You know, I think regardless of what regardless of what you believe,
Mm-hmm.
like working with your dreams and knowing it's about self-awareness too. And not a lot of people kind of disregard them, but if you're busy walking around and just kind of just going about, some people get just so wrapped up in like their daily activities or daily things, and it's really about just kind of stepping back. And I think it's a lot of getting to know yourself. Like we have these gifts that we're getting through our dreams, and it's like unfiltered, right? Without our ego getting away. It's like unfiltered messages to saying, like, hey, this is what you're really thinking or acting, or, this is what's really driving what you're feeling and driving, your actions. And if people take the time to kind of to kind of just have that self-awareness and that self-care and look at themselves, it can be very, very healing, regardless of whatever beliefs that you really have. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just find it, yeah, I find it fascinating and healing in all ways. Yeah, in all ways.
And so what do you have to say, for example, if someone keeps dreaming of the same person?
If they keep dreaming of the same person,
Mm-hmm.
well, I guess it would say, you know would have to say more information about that, because like
Yeah.
I said, if they would have to, it would be like, well, are depending on that, I mean, it depends on, it depends
It
on
could
that
be a
person.
multitude of things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it could be so many things, it's like, I, yeah, I would have to get more, I have to get more information, because the purpose of a lot of it is to, like, like the dream circles and how it's kind of interpreted is basically you reflecting and looking at, like, like I said, your self-awareness and kind of where you're at and what it means to you, and not really having anybody else interpret for you. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you could give examples, or like, if I was, dreaming of somebody, like if you elaborated on that, and I would take it as like, well, if I was dreaming of this certain person every single night or something of that, obviously for me, I'd be like, okay, I would want to contact them, or I mean, I don't know. It just depends, right? Are they
Yeah,
deceased? Are they
yeah,
not? I mean, there could
yeah,
be so many different things. I think it's just bringing, obviously, it's, trying to get your attention. I think the main purpose of it would be trying to get your attention to look at something,
right.
whether something's like deeper bothering you about it, whether it's just you need to contact that person, whether, I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
It could be so many different things, but obviously getting your attention. Yeah.
So, if you were to give advice, let's say to me, for example, or anyone
Mhm.
who's listening who wants to better understand their dreams, whether if it's recurrent or a
Mhm.
nightmare or just some random dream, you would suggest we write them down as soon as we wake up and then
Yeah,
think about what we're going through in our
absolutely.
lives?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, write it down. I mean, because a lot of people say, well, I don't remember my dreams, but if you have normal brain functioning, you are dreaming every night. And so, but it is a practice though. So yeah, keep a pen, paper, next to that and just jot down, even if you jot down a couple words or a couple things, it's a practice. And then you just get into a practice of either remembering them if you haven't, and also, yeah, having some self-reflection and really seeing kind of what's going on. You could either see patterns, or for example, for me, like if I'm in a car, it's kind of like, for me, that represents, okay, this is where I'm headed, where I'm driving. Before I got my diagnosis, I had dreamt I was in this car and I got like flipped around. Like the
Mm,
car turned did like a whole 360 and went in a different direction. And I thought, okay, what is going on and what does this mean? And it literally, my life flipped around, like
yeah.
flipped, turned in a different direction. And at one point during my treatment, I was like not in the driver's seat of this car. I was in a car, but I was kind
Mm-hmm.
of like in the back seat, where I was just like, do do do, here I am. I'm just like going through this. And I thought to myself, I need to get in the driver's seat of this car. Like,
Yeah.
but I mean, I went through so much, and being on all these medications. And that's another thing that can interfere with dreams too, depending on like your medications and what you're on and what you're taking. I know that they kind of, like, when I was on a heavier chemotherapy, and some of it, I was like, they stopped some of my, I wasn't having them as much, or they stopped. And when I did have one like that, it was like, okay, I was feeling at that time kind of out of it, just going through a lot of emotional things. And I thought, I got to get in the driver's seat of this car. Like, I got to like take charge. I got to like do some, do something. I went through so much self reflection, so much like, okay, where am I at in my life? Where do I want to go? What am I doing? And when I did finally have the dream that I had finally had a dream, I was in the front seat of the car. I was like, hallelujah. Like, yay, I made it. Like, I just put this intention of, okay, now I'm in the driver's seat. The car wasn't moving yet, but I was getting somewhere. I
Yeah.
was like, I moved from the back to the front. Yay. And then I decided in the middle, of this radiation treatment, I thought, if I were to pass, if I were to die in a week, what would I want to do with my life? Like, what would I want to do? And one of the things was, I want to run a dream circle. And I know that that was like a passion of mine. And that's what I did. I said, you know what? In the middle of radiation treatment, but I am not where the point where I was really bad, like I was bedridden, or anything
Mm-hmm.
like that. I'm like, okay, I'm able bodied enough to get down there to do it. So you know what? I'm going to do it. And then I
Mm-hmm.
just decided to start.
Yeah.
So yeah, so they can be really empowering when you start to, like, look at them and write them down, and kind of just like motivate you, and you could see like where you're heading, or where you don't want to head towards.
Yeah. So basically,
Yeah.
you didn't feel in control when you were having those dreams, and then you tried to take some control, and then that's how you ended up in the driver's seat. So, like, the narrative of the dream changed.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
Mhm.
I see.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to have to
Yeah.
implement things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it can, it can be a very empowering process and things. And it's, and from like, and more of like, mixing those ancient traditions, and from an ancient perspective, like, I mean, that's what a lot of indigenous cultures, they really looked at their dreams as part of survival, and just part of having that community. I think a community of support, like sharing our dreams and sharing, like, what's to come. And a lot of times it was viewed part of as like just a survival too. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of, I don't know, connects us in a different way, you
Yeah.
know, and so that's an important piece. Yeah.
Do you, now this might be totally random, but do you think our pets dream?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. Yes, especially when their paws are flick their paws are going up and down.
Oh,
Like you can see they're running somewhere, they're they're doing something. Yeah, absolutely. hmm I think there is some science on that they do dream. I don't know, but yeah, there. I think I did. Yeah,
mm.
there is some science that they actually do. They do dream. Yes.
And as far as meditation and dreaming, is that something that's connected, you think? Can we make ourselves dream? I mean, or are we dreaming when we're meditating? Or,
Yeah. I mean, Yes. I think that it's somewhat, there is that connection. Like you do, like I do with these drumming, almost drumming like meditations and whatnot, and the drum kind of helps you have, like I say, just gets you more relaxed, but you can have these kind of visions, and they can almost, they're like in the dream state. There's
mm-hmm,
that in between state too, kind of when you're waking up
mm-hmm,
and like maybe not fully awake, where there is like still, you're still having like certain visions, or certain things are coming up for you, or certain whatever, where there's that window, um, that is very similar. I think it's very, very similar. Yeah.
yeah. I've learned a lot from you, and I feel like there's so much more we could probably learn and talk about our dreams. I know, like I said, reoccurring dreams is something that a lot of people have.
Hmm.
And so I guess it's think about where you're at if you are having a reoccurring dream to see if there's something you're struggling with or something going on in your life, right? I wish I had
Right.
known to do that when I was younger because that's the only reoccurring dream I've ever had, which was of the
hmm
waves.
Yeah.
But it's definitely interesting to see self reflect on what it is and why we may be dreaming what we are.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for anyone out there as far as dreams and how to interpret them before we finish here?
Any advice? Well, I think it's just pay attention. I think that, I think a lot of people just don't, and it's not really talked about, and if you have either children, or if you don't have children, nephews, nieces, anybody, like, be, inspire them too, to just talk about their dreams, and find out, just by paying attention, and just by having, I think, the conversation. I think it just connects us, and it just brings light to it, and it can also bring healing and insight, into our lives. So I think just having a conversation about it, or just asking your, either whoever, your significant other or your relatives, when you wake up in the morning, ask them, what did you dream? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so if people want to look for you, how can they find you?
I am on Instagram at Danielle.Mandarino, and you can find me there. I post a lot of stuff right now about dreaming and hypnotherapy. So that's mainly where I do, but I'm also have a Facebook page as well. It's Danielle Mandarino.
Perfect. And I'll put that and link it on the episode as well. And then tag you when I post it on my stories. But I definitely feel like if you guys have any questions, please feel free to like reach out and stuff. And if we can probably do another one. Because I feel like dreams, there's so much, even remember I was talking about it, even in my line of work, I see a lot of crazy stuff.
Yes.
with death and
Yes.
dying. I feel like we could
Yes.
probably do a whole episode just on that.
Oh my gosh, we totally could. And of course, I have a whole story about that.
Yeah.
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 So, yes, thank you. Thank you. This was really fun.
Yes, thank you so much for being on. And I really hope that, you touched a lot of people and just at least let's think about our dreams, right? Like, I mean, when you started
Yeah.
telling me more about it, I was like, oh my God, like,
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
yeah. So, all right, everyone, thank you for listening and I'll see you guys next time. Bye. That was episode 89 of the Purposely Curious podcast. Make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on most podcast platforms, and follow us on social media at Purposely Curious on Instagram and at Purposely Sleep Pod, C Pod, on Twitter. That's Purposely the letter C Pod. Until next time, you know what to do.